Hello and welcome to Feminist Frequency's Star Trek podcast. That did not take me 3 tries to get out properly. It's fine. Everything is going well because we're back with season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, which isn't trash. And I'm really excited that it's not total trash. I'm your host, Anita Sarkeesian, and I've got some wonderful recurring guests for you today. You will remember Steve Shives, who is a YouTuber who makes videos where he talks about Star Trek and other things you won't find quite as interesting. Potentially. I don't know. Depends who you are, right?
Yeah, I guess if you fall within a certain niche, you might find some of the rest of it interesting too.
And Lara Hudson, who is a writer for television, video games, and the occasional piece of journalism. I feel like that description really undervalues you, Lara, because you are like one of my all-time favorite writers and thinkers. So, just
Thank you, Anita. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're the best. All right. Welcome, friends.
Awesome to be here.
It's nice to be here to talk to humans.
I know. I don't even know what that means anymore. So we are going to talk about episodes 4 and 5 today. And let's just do it. So y'all know how we do. We just steal from CBS and read their descriptions of these episodes just to give you a quick refresher when you are listening to this. So Steve, will you read the description for Forget Me Not?
Absolutely. Episode 4, Forget Me Not. Burnham and Adira visit the Trill homeworld in hopes of unlocking the secrets trapped within Adira's mind. Back on the USS Discovery, Saru's efforts to help the crew reconnect with one another take a surprising turn.
Perfect. And Lara, will you tell us what happened on Die Trying?
After reuniting with what remains of Starfleet and the Federation, the USS Discovery and its crew must prove that a 930-year-old crew and starship are exactly what this new future needs.
That is the description of that episode.
That
is what happened. All right, so because y'all are new to season 3 with us, like, real quick, what are your thoughts of like how the season is going so far?
In general, I feel like, God, I really wanted Discovery to be good. Where it's like, I was rooting for you for a long time in the same way that I was for Picard. And again, I try to remember season 1 of Next Generation with some obvious exceptions. It was also garbage. So I've been rooting for Discovery to kind of come through and be more of, it doesn't have to be the exact Star Trek I want it to be. And it obviously shouldn't and can't be, TNG or DS9, but I wanted it to.
Voyager. How dare you?
Listen, but I wanted it to be as people say in video games, at least a spiritual successor. I wanted it to have that core Star Trekness that I feel like has been missing from certainly the movies and a lot of other stuff. And I feel like we've finally started to see that come through in this season. It hasn't been perfect, but I feel like it has that fundamental core, and that makes me really happy. And it makes me really excited to keep watching.
Yeah, I have liked it so far. By the end of season 2, I had pretty much decided that I loved the show. Like season 2 got me to the point where I was like, okay, I'm no longer going to qualify this and say, oh, it's good, but it has problems. I mean, it is good and it does have problems, but by the end of season 2, I was like, I love this show. I'm excited for more of this show. Season 3 has not quite been that good yet, but there hasn't been anything that I have thought was terrible. Like I have friends who are fellow Star Trek nerds some of whom like it way more than I have so far. Like they're saying like, oh my God, the first episode of season 3, I was in tears. It was so beautiful. And I just didn't get that from it at all. But
monster.
But I also have friends who absolutely thought it was garbage and were like, I can't believe I'm still watching this show. So I'm sort of, in the middle on it. But there have been moments that I have absolutely loved. When they officially made Saru the captain, I got a little misty-eyed because I love Saru and I love his character arc throughout the series. Some of Burnham's moments so far have been nice. Tilly is great as usual.
I feel like Tilly has been like the consistent greatness of Tilly has not wavered in us just like loving her. Like she's you're great. Like this show is a dumpster fire and total trash, but Tilly is like our goddess.
Give me more Tilly. And Stamets and Jet Reno have some really nice banter in the first couple episodes that really made me laugh. Because I think Anthony Rapp and Tig Notaro have really good chemistry together as performers. So I mean, I've liked it. I haven't been completely over the moon for it, but I've liked it.
Yeah, and I think that, and we've talked about this before. Like, Star Trek can't be everything that people want it to be. Like, it's not going to be everything to everyone at every moment, right? And our memories and our feelings of Star Trek are so tied up with our childhoods, or tied up with all kinds of emotional things that we relate to shows that we watched when we were younger, and and everything we're putting on it. So like, yeah, I make the joke of like, there's constantly the Voyager versus DS9 argument, but like, I haven't watched Voyager in 10 years. I have no fucking idea if I would still like it or not. Right. Like, I'm remembering liking it at the time that I watched it. So I think that it's interesting to hear, like, there's such a variance in folks who like this season, don't like this season, et cetera. Like, I have been loving it. Like, I finally, like, the first 3 episodes, I was like, holy shit, like, this feels good to me. This feels like a good sort of like newness to the show, but also some of the diplomacy and some of the like struggle and like the crew is together and they're operating like, they're not arguing with each other, or like they aren't secret agent spies, whatever the hell, what's his face was in the first season from another timeline. So I've just been really enjoying it. I have to say though, like, we'll get into this, but 4 and 5 just didn't quite do it for me the way that the first 3 episodes did. And I think we can talk a little bit more about like what's happening in those episodes and why it feels that way. But before we do that, I want to like, I don't want to bury the lead here. Because I think that gender representation on Star Trek is such an important thing with what they're doing, right? We have so many more people of color on the show. We have so much more like inclusiveness in the cast and in the characters that we're engaging with. Like, there are moments where I was like, wait, is everyone on screen a person of color right now? Like, that's fucking rad. And so continuing that trend, we have now been introduced to our first trans character in any Star Trek ever by the character's name is Gray, played by Ian Alexander. And like, I have some issue with the fact that like the first trans character is on for like 5 minutes and dies.
Yeah.
But like,
or do they?
Well, exactly. Right. That I was texting a friend being like, oh, what the fuck? This is such bullshit. But then you see them again, or you see him again at the end, and you're like, okay, you might be recurring. You might like show up more and more because you're living inside of your lover. Like, what?
And I do think that that's something that is interestingly a through line of 4 and 5 is, what does death mean? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to die, particularly in a universe where identity is so fluid, where states of being are so fluid? I think that's, I mean, we can get into it with Trills and, how that functions. But I think that when we're talking about identity, it's interesting that they dig into it in that way as well. What does it mean? And I think Trills have always played with that idea of like, what does it mean? I think, when you look back at DS9 with Jadzia, that was when... Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was them trying to like get around, the whole, well, they, but they're not really gay together because Jadzia used to be a man and she used to be, I don't know. And I don't care. But like that idea of you are this, you have these person's memories and they are you and you are them, but also you're not. Right. I always found that to be such a fascinating concept, and poking that idea that identity is not always one thing, and it's, not always static, and it can be fluid in ways that can be difficult to define or understand. I like that because, again, I think they poked at it in DS9, and I feel like there is a fuller potential exploration of that I don't know, this character could be a part of, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here, because one of the things that I have liked about the character of Adira, who is played by a non-binary actor, and we're told that the character will eventually be referred to as non-binary as well, but so far she's referred to with female pronouns, but that they have given Adira things other than the fact that she is a trans character. That is that presumably will become a part of her character at some point, will become an acknowledged part of her character. But she's a human with a Trill symbiont. She's apparently an engineering genius. Like they're setting her up to have story potential for things other than just representation of an underrepresented group, which I think is really smart and really good, because the kind of representation you want is not to have people just reduced to one identity. You want to show people being a part of the community and contributing in all sorts of ways and being fully realized individuals who are allowed to be who they are. And it seems like they're setting that character up for that. And I hopefully they follow through on that, and
that character is a part
realized.
of, like, Adira is going to be a part of this crew now, right?
Yeah.
That like an important piece of the crew. I think that I do want to point out that having Gray being a trans character whose transness doesn't matter, like isn't a hardship, isn't a difficulty, isn't a challenge to their existence, and is someone who is desirable and lovable, I think is really, really important. And I like that they made sure that was a component of this character. I would love to hear more sort of pieces or opinions from the trans community about these characters. And we're going to see them come into life a little bit more in the show as the show progresses, I imagine. But like, I am a little bit like, are you siloing these people together? Like you have what have been told will be a non-binary character who is played by a non-binary actor. And you've put them together as lovers, and then you've put one inside of the other. Like I'm a little bit like, please don't silo like all the transness on this show into this one storyline or this one character. I don't think that's too much to ask.
I also wonder what this means, and I don't know that this is good or bad. I think it's interesting is that, I think they have made an effort to suggest that Adira is their own person. There's that moment with the admiral or whatever, where he's like, I was friends with, Senatal, but you're a different person. It's like, yeah, well, they are. But for Adira's, realization of, their transness, like, I hope that, does that come about as a fact of getting access to these other memories and being influenced by that, or is it something that's in and of themselves? I don't know. I don't know if that seems like a really fine distinction, but there's a part of me that, wants Adira to have their transness as something that's particular to them and not something that's like given to them by having access to the memories of all these other people.
Yeah. And also like the fact that the two trans characters are now Trill, like hosts or symbiote or whatever the lore is of Trillness. That is
yeah,
right. They're hosts, but like it's complicated because Adira is human and et cetera, et cetera. But like like you're saying, I think I might just be repeating your idea here or your thought here, but like I love the mythology of the Trill, and I love the mythology of like that whole universe and that society. And I want us to talk a little bit more about how that comes out into this episode. But I do worry that like, well, I don't even know how to say this, like that that the trans characters are intergenerational. And so they have all of these different genders inside of them, which then makes them
yeah.
Like clearly Gray is trans first and foremost before he becomes Trill, but like the fact that they're Trill, he's Trill, and I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know how to articulate this point. Like they're not just humans that are non-binary or that are trans in the world. They have to have this other component that creates depth to their gender identity, because now they are inhabiting all these memories of all these different genders.
What I think is key to me is I don't want it to be like being, getting a symbiont, made them trans. I'd love to see a discussion of, I'd always felt this, or blah, blah, blah. I could see, especially as a young person, suddenly having access to experience in memory as experiencing the world as a different gender, that could open your mind up. That could help you have a realization. I just hope it is that. And, I do think we have some precedent for thinking about it this way in terms of Trill culture, right? Because there is that, heavy emphasis on, you don't just go get back with, your ex in a new body, right? Like you were given these memories, you were given these experiences to make you a richer person, not to become any of these people or pretend to be any of these people. It's like there are stories that you get to experience as memories, but they are not you. And I think that, making that is as fuzzy of a line as it may feel when it's like part of you. I think it's important in this case that they dig into that having access to those memories, that's not her. She is, and that's the name changes it. She is a Diratal. She is he. I'm not sure which one we're using or that they're using.
So the character Adira is referred to as she on the show currently.
Okay. So yeah, I hope that they do that. They clearly delineate her as a separate being who is informed by, but not created by or instantiated by these memories and experiences.
It's always interesting to me when Star Trek chooses to deal with a topic or to represent a group directly rather than allegorically. And I'm really hoping, like we've been talking about for the last couple of minutes with Adira, like I do really hope that she comes out as non-binary, because that is just truly her identity, not because of the Trill thing. Because I find it interesting that it looks like what they're doing with Lieutenant Detmer's story, with her sort of dealing with the trauma of crashing the ship. Maybe they're still another shoe to drop with that, but at first it looked like, well, maybe there's like going to be some sci-fi stuff going on. Or maybe she's going through some Star Trek thing, like she's been infected by some kind of alien thing, or maybe, Control, the evil AI from last season, has entered her consciousness or something, and that's why she's acting weird. But it looks like, it turns out, no, she's just going through some stuff. Like she's just processing trauma from crashing the ship. And it's the sort of thing that anyone who has been through a traumatic event might have to deal with. And it's not a sci-fi twist. It's just someone who has been through a trauma and needs some help to work on it. And I hope that's the direction they're going with her, because that's really interesting. And again, the sort of thing that Star Trek doesn't always do. Star Trek usually historically has tried to come up with like a sci-fi twist on a real issue or a real, experience, and then explore it through that. Like what we mentioned earlier with Jadzia, in DS9, reconnecting with someone who had been her partner in a previous host, and then through that they do the same-sex kiss, and they do like an allegory of discrimination against gay people, instead of literally telling that story. And with Detmer and her PTSD, if we can call it that, it seems like they're actually just going to have a character dealing with PTSD, and hopefully, with Adira's identity, they'll do the same thing. It won't be, well, this is meant to sort of allegorically stand for a non-binary person's identity, but it's actually some other thing. Hopefully they actually do allow the character to just be that.
I do think that trauma was an interesting through line for both of the episodes. And I think we did see it happen on both literal and allegorical levels. I think with Detmer, I thought it was going to be like, oh, she damaged her augment in the crash, because I remember her holding her head.
That's 100% what I thought it was. Yeah.
And I think it's actually interesting that it's like, no, the augment's fine. The damage is, because that's the whole thing about PTSD, right? Like if you're physically hurt, everyone can look and be like, you're hurt. When you have PTSD, it's damage that no one can see, but then can affect you just as profoundly. So we see her going through that. We see Adira going through, her blocking out the memories of her hosts because she hasn't processed this traumatic experience that she had with acquiring the symbiont, with losing Gray. I don't know if there's an analogy in there about having a realization about herself, potentially needing to navigate trauma to do that or not. But then you get to the 5th episode and you have, I was like, oh, we're just going for it. You also have the entire crew with, why can I not think of the captain's name now? Why is my brain broken? Saru, realizing that the entire crew has experienced this profound loss of their home, of their time, of all of their families, of everything, and trying to help them process that. And then in 5, you get the father who has, his family has died, and, he goes out of phase. He basically decouples with the world, with, the physical world, with the tangible world, with his place and time, because he can't accept reality. That idea of like, grief is coming to terms with reality and being able to be there and not in the past and move on. I feel like that was doing more of like the allegorical trauma thing. But I think both episodes were coming at it from a bunch of different angles, which I found interesting.
Yeah, which I think will be recurring and ongoing because they're clearly that the scenario in which everyone is living, the world as it exists, like, is very traumatic, both in terms of like the crew coming in from the past and the people living in that time period, having lived through the burn and the destruction or the dismantling of the Federation. I also want to just remind us that this is not the first time Discovery has dealt with PTSD. That Tyler, that was, I thought, that was one of the few things I liked about that season and of that character who was otherwise irritating, was that they actually talked about like PTSD as it relates to being violated, abuse against men, and so that's interesting. I do not like the way they're dealing with this with Detmer. It's weird to me. And I think that so episode 4 for me, I don't have a problem with what it was doing, and I don't have a problem with like the story and like the way that they're building these characters. It just felt so amateur. Like the storytelling didn't feel as sophisticated as I have come to expect from contemporary television and that I've come to expect from this season of the show. And so, for example, you were saying there's two parts of this, I think. With Detmer, I was like, there's got to be more. This can't just be PTSD. Like the way that they're framing it, like, feels different. And then having her like say what she said to Stamets, which I think, Steve, you were talking about, like, it sounds like she was possessed. And then her just going, and then she goes to Culber and says, like, yeah, I'm not okay. And it's hard for me to say that. So to me, they set up all of these, like, I don't know, like gray herrings almost. Like they set up all these things to make us think it was anything other than PTSD because nobody else is reacting in the same way that she's reacting. And let's be honest, PTSD, there are signs and symptoms that are very similar across people with PTSD. It's not just like everyone has their own way of expressing it, although it can manifest a little bit differently. And then you have this moment with Culber where she's like, pilots are macho. And so it's hard for me to admit that I need help. Like I need psychological support. And I was like, but there's nothing about you that has ever been macho on this show ever. Right. And you just not wanting to admit that you're struggling emotionally. Like everything that they're doing with her character around PTSD just feels so weird and like it doesn't sink and it's pulling me out of the story.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the whole macho thing was almost like a retcon to like make a point about PTSD and not something that felt authentic to the character. I mean, to me, also on a practical level, we've seen her having like, I don't know if we'd call them brownouts or whatever, but certainly moments where it has visibly affected her ability to fly the ship in ways that other people have repeatedly noticed. Obviously, there have been other people on the crew who have been like, you seem not okay. She has one of the most important and critical positions on the ship. Like if someone were a surgeon and they were having weird brownouts, while holding a scalpel, I think someone would be like, hey, we need to get you some help. And also you probably should put down the scalpel. Like I find it a little bit troubling that people are noticing that she is having serious cognitive effects while at the wheel of the entire ship. And everyone's, even when the Admiral tells Saru, like, yeah, her baseline is really messed up and she's not okay. He's like, she'll be fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I'm like, it's not fine, you guys. Like even beyond the denial of like, oh, my friend's okay, like on a practical level, she probably shouldn't be driving the ship right now.
I think you can chalk part of that up to this, like, for as much as it seems more interested in dealing with the long-term effects of their experiences than other past Star Trek shows have been, it's still mostly a Star Trek show because that's sort of a classic way of dealing with characters in Star Trek shows, isn't it? Like they go through these incredibly traumatic experiences that would destroy a normal person emotionally, and next week it's like it never happened. Or if it's a really, really traumatic experience, they might get one episode to kind of work through it, and then it's never mentioned again. So with Discovery, it's kind of like, yeah, we'll acknowledge that there are long-term effects, that the shock of being transported 1,000 years into the future is something that they're not just going to get over. And with Detmer specifically, she's having particular trauma because she was flying the ship when it crashed into the planet. And, she's deeply affected by that and very shaken by that. But she's still
But
going to
also,
work.
like, I don't know. There's something about and I'm happy to be totally wrong here. I'm happy to always be wrong. No, that's not true. But that's not true at all.
You'll
but
grudgingly admit that you were wrong.
Yeah, like she crashes the ship, and so I just don't buy that. I don't buy that that's as big of a deal as it is. Like I buy that like you're having PTSD because like you literally are never going to see your life again. I don't know why that's not a bigger thing, right? Like it's, you've made this choice, your life is irrevocably changed. It's very Voyager, right? Like I'm getting really strong Voyager vibes in the like, okay, the captain needs to like emotionally support the crew because you might never see your home again. And that crew didn't even make the choice. It just happened to them, right? But like, I don't know, wouldn't pilots have crashed shit before and you've like gone through things and your ship has just like fallen apart and stuff? It doesn't feel big enough to me. It doesn't feel like a strong enough motivation here for this storyline.
I'll agree with you to the point that I think that it feels like a lot all at once for Detmer. Part of that, I think, is because she's one of the characters that has not been terribly well served by the show up to this point. Like Laura said a minute ago, she has one of the most important jobs on the ship. She is a very, very crucial member of the crew, but as a member of the cast of the show, she hasn't really been all that important. We haven't spent a lot of time with her. We don't really know her all that well. I think in season 2, they gave her a couple of lines or a couple of scenes to sort of shade in a little bit of her, but we don't really know her that well. So now all of a sudden she's got this it's a B or a C story, but still it's like an important story that we keep coming back to and getting updates on, and it has developed. And it just seems like an awful lot for this character in the 3rd season of the show, who theoretically is a super important person on the ship, but who we don't really know all that well. So it's hard to say like whether this is in character for her or out of character for her, or, because we don't really know her.
But I mean, one thing I will say about the season and sort of the tail end of the last season is that it did start to do this specific thing, which is something I think is very Star Trek-y and something I like, which is you get the character episode, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, this is because before I felt like it was more ensemble focused, more action focused, more season-long story arc focused, with some exceptions, but you didn't get the, like, this is their episode, let's learn about them now. And we get that for Adira right up front. Mm-hmm. I like that we get more of that with Detmer, but I do agree with Anita that it feels weirdly unfocused, which is why I think we keep coming up with these different hypotheses for it. It's also like, yeah, in real life, crashing a ship like that, it would certainly be enough to give you PTSD, but it feels so general in the sense that, yeah, she was driving, everyone crashed. It's hard to pick out as a dramatic story point. For Adira, it's like, yeah, an asteroid hit the ship and like killed her boyfriend, and then she had to have surgery 5 minutes later. Yeah, that'll do it. I get it, right?
Yeah, totally.
But it's like for Detmer, it was like a general action sequence occurred, and now she has PTSD. And I think it's harder. Again, these are invented narratives. We can make them whatever we want. It doesn't feel like dramatic and sticky enough. Or if you are going to go for the subtle thing, then talk about that. Like acknowledge that PTSD can occur from, even if everyone else is doing fine, I'm not doing fine. I think that I think there's something there that's not sticky enough, that's not either being acknowledged enough in terms of it being dramatic enough, or acknowledged enough in terms of they should be saying these things if they want them to be subtle and have us understand them. I feel like there is a gap there. Or, maybe it's connected to something earlier in her life. We could have flashbacks. That's fine. I agree with Anita that like, I like Detmer. I like that we're seeing more of her, but it feels like there's something missing there in the story they're trying to tell.
Yeah. Before we go dive into episode 5, I do want to just talk a little bit about the Trill planet and the like what happened there, because so this is another reason why I thought episode 4 sucked, is because I love what the idea of like there's a Trill in a human body and that could be the future of their race that's like clearly decimated and they don't have enough hosts and all of that. And that's really tragic, right? It's like a slow burning genocide in some ways, which, I don't know if that's the right word for that, but it just felt so simple, but not in the good way that I think storytelling can be simple. It was like, okay, you get to the planet and then they are like, no, you can't do this. And then they secretly go into the pool and then they come out of the pool and they're like, oh, you're right. We're sorry. We almost tried to kill you. Right? Like, you're just like, what the fuck? Like, there's just so many pieces of that I was like, come on already. I will say, though, that I think the end of this episode was very emotional. Like, the very end of this episode, I was like, oh shit, these are feelings. Like, when they said, say your names, like, I straight up started to cry.
Yeah.
Like, that was really powerful. And it reminds me of if you watched Lovecraft Country. We talked about this on a bonus of Feminist Frequency Radio about how, like, that episode where she, like, gets to speak her name and she gets to speak who she wants to be. Like, this idea of your identity and claiming it is really, really powerful. So that one piece of this I, like, adored. But the rest of it, I was like, man, really? Like, you could have done this a little smoother.
And I do want to say, as a quick note, like, the whole it feels like a genealogy, right? Like, there's in some cultures they have that, like, so and so, son of so and so, son of so and so, son of so and so, and that is another way to think about Trill identity, right? Like, yeah, it's inside them, but, like, so is your family in a sense. If your family is genetically related to you, that you are informed by it, but not predetermined by it. Maybe that's another cool analogy to have. I also 100% agree. Like, it felt very, I don't know. I felt jerked around by the oversimplicity of it. Like, I also don't think that was a conflict. It was a little hat on a hat. There was enough conflict in, like, yeah, she is a human with a Trill inside of her. She may or may not be able to access those memories. She may or may not be able, like, who knows if she's even a long-term viable host, and who knows what's going to happen or how safe or dangerous it will be to go in the pool. I feel like that was enough conflict right there. You didn't have to add the extra layer of, like, we're going to threaten you. Now get off the planet. Now it's like, even if they'd been like, yeah, we don't know what's up with this. This could be really dangerous. We're going to go with you. Let's see what's happening.
Well, and then Michael going in the pool instead of them that are the actual bearers of the pool, like, it just, and even, like, you're talking about the conflict in this episode was very poorly done. Like, even at the haiku dinner, which the haiku shit was fucking amazing. I'm sorry. I was like, okay, cool. I'm down with this. But even that conflict, like, was resolved in 2 seconds. Like, it was gruesome. And then it was resolved a minute later. I don't know. This might be unfair to say, but I feel like they may have given this episode to a junior writer, right? Like, when they handed out the episodes, it was given to a junior writer, and, like, no hard feelings. You're doing great. Love you. Congrats on the job. But, like, it just needed a little bit more smoothing. It needed a little more, like, nuance.
Yeah.
I also wonder. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I do think that, like, the resolution of the Trill storyline was a little too neat, because there was that one guy who was a total jerk about Adira being human and was like, this is an abomination, and then at the end he's just like, oh, never mind, my bad.
Right. At least have him, like, huff off in a pissy rage or something,
Have him be, like, outvoted or something. Like, have the rest of the people be like, no, you just shut up. This is going to be how it is.
And actually, wouldn't that be more interesting if this is going to be a longer term thing and they are bringing in humans and other races, where there probably would be a faction? It's like, no, this should only be for Trills. Like, blah, blah. Like, yeah, have that faction. Have some factions. Leave it complex.
Yeah.
That's more interesting. Yeah. But I do think it's the neat resolution. Like, it's almost like, I think about it like there's certain, guideposts in the plot line where it's like, okay, well, we need to get to here, and we need to get to here, and we need to get to here. And it's like, where they're like, you know what, we want to have Michael in the pool with her so they can have that sequence in the thing. How do we get there? Doesn't matter. Just get her in the pool.
Yeah. How do we get there is we send Michael instead of Culber so that they can have the TV, so that they can have the dinner with everybody hasn't been gone for a year. Like, it's just, it's fine. Like, but it's just so contrived at some point.
Yeah. It feels like Michael goes in the pool because Michael is the protagonist of the series. Yeah. Like, that's the reason. And they don't really they justify it a little tiny bit beyond that, just so you'll accept it. And
they have to show a bonding of those two characters, because for some reason Adira didn't want Michael to go. Like, that wasn't really explained. Like, why does she prefer Culver over Michael, and so they needed a way to bond them so that something in the future can happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, I get that, whatever, storytelling, like, series long storytelling, it's fine, but it's still like, it's very transparent in a way that I think is tiring sometimes.
I will say before we move on to talk, I guess talk in more detail about the next episode. It was difficult for me to be critical of episode 4. Even though I acknowledge it, I mean, it's not a perfect episode, and for the things we've been talking about already, but there are 2 things in the episode that absolutely hit me right in the sweet spot. The first is just the fact that the Trill stuff is a return to elements of the franchise that were introduced in Deep Space Nine, which is my favorite show in the franchise. And even though the Trill mythology was never my favorite part of the show, I mean, I loved the character of Jadzia, but the Trill lore was not necessarily what I connected with. But it's always cool to see callbacks to Deep Space Nine in the newer shows, because that's just my jam. That's my favorite Star Trek. But also, first of all, there's a Buster Keaton reference in episode 4. Buster Keaton is my favorite ever. The movie that they watch for movie night, the Buster Keaton movie that Saru shows everybody, is Sherlock Jr., which is no shit my favorite movie ever.
Aww.
So I was texting a friend while I was watching this episode, and I was saying to her, hi Dana, by the way, my friend who I was texting. I said, if this goes the way I think this is going to go, this is going to turn out to be like my favorite episode ever. And it turned out they actually were watching Sherlock Jr. I'm like, they are literally watching my favorite movie.
That's delightful.
In
I
a
love
Star
that.
Trek show.
Yeah,
I do.
really cool.
I do sometimes. I mean, this is something that used to annoy me, and I feel like I've given in and I've abandoned my objections. Where it's like, yeah, this is like the 20th century, and they're like, what we happen to be obsessed with is things that took place in the late 1990s and early aughts on Earth. I fucking love baseball. I love Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And so there was actually this meme that pointed out something related to this, where it's like always on Star Trek, where they're like the great writers of history, like Shakespeare and Mark Twain and Glock Beetleborg of, the Bug Planet, where they always do that. It's like 2 things and then one completely ridiculous thing. But like most of the things are always like this hyper specific 40-year period on Earth for like reasons. But like, you know what? I don't care anymore. I don't care that it's baseball. I don't care that it's Sherlock Holmes. I don't care that it's Buster Keaton. I've given in, and I'm just going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? But like, I agree. I completely agree. And I think I've gone on that same trajectory as you too, where I'm always like, well, can't you say the thing that we know and then say another thing that we don't know that's like related? Like in the century we know, like I most of the time they don't do the glug 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 Bug Planet thing. Most of the time they just do like, hey, remember the Renaissance? No, you don't. You don't fucking remember the Renaissance.
Like, why is Saru talking about the discovery of the 3-point perspective after the Dark Ages? I'm like, here's the thing, though. Here's the cool thing about making up total other alien cultures is you could completely make up a whole artistic movement that perfectly fits whatever weird analogy you want and just say it happened on the Bug Planet. Doesn't matter. Like you can make that shit up. I would love to see them do that. I think it'd be really funny.
I agree.
By the way, if anybody has never read the work of Glug Beetleborg of the Bug Planet, it's highly recommended. But
very important.
That trope of everybody being obsessed with 20th century culture in Star Trek that allows them to make one of my favorite jokes that they've ever made in anything Star Trek. And I think it's in Star Trek Beyond when they're on the Franklin and they're going through the music library and they start playing the Beastie Boys song. And of course we've established that Captain Kirk is a Beastie Boys fan, but one of the other characters hears the music and he goes, "Is that classical music?" So.
Oh my God.
I did love Worf's obsession with Klingon opera, and I did love that it was occasionally performed on DS9 at unexpected times. I did like that. I did like that.
So I think the last thing in this episode that's worth just like commenting on is the reminder about the sphere, because I totally fucking forgot about all of that. So like that clearly is going to be became very relevant in episode 5 when they're trying to explain the value of Discovery and why they shouldn't recommission the ship and all of that. So that happened. I will also say my notes for episode 4 said, "I'm bored," Ending is sweet. I miss Book. That was my takeaway. I miss my hottie boyfriend, okay? Like I haven't seen him in ages and I really miss him. And he should be in every episode.
You know what made me think of him is you brought up, Beardy McKlingon face. Who was that?
Tyler.
Tyler. Where I was just like, I never liked him for Michael. I really didn't.
No,
and of
course not.
I know that, so far that, they're playing it down. There's chemistry there with Book that was, interesting and real.
They're totally going to make out. We saw it in the previews. It's going to be great. And I'm going to jump for joy on that episode.
Yeah.
It'll be awesome.
I'm excited.
Okay. So episode 5 is, what'd you think of episode 5? Oh, yeah.
I didn't like it as much as 4, but partly, and maybe this is similar to Steve. Like I'm a big DS9 fan. Currently rewatching it with my brother as we speak. Well, I mean, in general, not this exact moment. And like the Trills have always been one of my favorite species, and so yeah, like I think I was more attracted to that than I was to what's the species that Non is and that the guy is on the station. Varzan. Yeah, and they also said they don't have the same relationship with death, but I don't know that they ever explained what that was. We can get to that in a second. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. I just didn't find it as compelling as, let's the dinner party haiku trauma event and then the visit to the Trill homeworld.
It's also an episode that doesn't it will have weight in terms of the fact that they are doing something to gain respect and trust of the existing Federation. But that whole story with the Barzan, I think, is like a passing story. So it probably didn't have the same kind of weight where the Trill story isn't a passing story. It's because of Adira.
What we did,
I don't agree. I liked 5 better than 4, but I think that's like,
what we did get as nerds. Which I wanted, you tell me, your mileage may vary, was like, yeah, I wanted that thing about like what century are we in now again?
I think it's like the 32nd or something.
Sure.
It's
32nd century. What does the Federation look like? Yeah, like I want to see the ship that's entirely made out of like, holographic walls. I want to see the ship that's this giant floating rainforest. I want to see all their eyes bright with like Federation wonder, like the future. I think having that nice moment of like, yeah, the Federation has endured. It looks really fucking cool. It's like that moment that I feel like the first time when you saw them go down to like, the Federation in San Francisco, and it's just like kind of beautiful future utopian world. And you're like, oh, it's so great. And like, yeah, it's more complicated now in the way that they're addressing it, and it should be, but I don't know, that whole wide-eyed, string soaring, here's the Federation of the future. Like as a fan, I liked that. I thought that was cool.
I had a hard time with how excited they were to find the Federation for 2 reasons. One was that I was just waiting for the shoe to drop, right? I was like, you cannot have your cast be this excited about something and something bad not be about to happen. Which it did, but not as severely as I thought it was going to be. And then the other thing is that I don't know. I don't feel there's something. So they set it up with the opening monologue, and I just don't think it was enough for me because I'm like, these people have made the choice to leave their homes and their families forever. And the choice was made in the blink of an eye. Like they didn't actually, it was made in a very stressful, probably traumatic moment. Like it's not like this was a planned thing that they get to really sit through and think about and make the choice of. So like finding the Federation I get that you have nothing else and the Federation is the only thing that you have, but the Federation is totally different. You don't know any of these people. The technology is totally different. Like what you have is your family on the ship as the crew. That's it. So like the overwhelming excitement to find the Federation and that being like home and this being like what we know. I'm like, it's not actually anything that you know. It is completely different.
But I think like you think about the way that I like that we get to see how Michael reacts and how the rest of the crew reacts, because Michael has had time outside of the Federation and maybe always had problems with the Federation on some level as this institutional authority, right? Where I think she is the one that's more skeptical, but for the rest of them, like it's military, but not military, right? Like there's that sense of hierarchy, that sense of, well, you come back. Yeah, they are going to requisition it. Yeah, they can send you to other places, but it's also something that these people deeply believe in, like it's this enduring core that is stretched from, the time of
Yeah, that's true.
And the idea that like the whole thing is like the Federation endures, and to come back and be like, yeah, it does endure, and we can return to that and be a part of that. Like I think that's a very real ideal for them. And even though they get there and the guy's skeptical, and of course his girlfriend is trying to pull them apart, and they do the thing, it is still the Federation, right? I mean, I don't know, Steve, what did you think?
And what I agree with you. And I think the episode, to your concern, Anita, like I think the episode deals with that. I think like they are shown to be super happy to have found the Federation. There's that shot where they're, gathering at the window and looking out at the ships in wonder as the Discovery flies through that sort of bubble that protects the Federation now. And then they're disillusioned. Like they are, the other shoe does drop, but it's not a shoe of, oh, the Federation is evil now, or the Federation is corrupt, or whatever. It's more subtle than that. It's, well, we don't really trust you guys yet. And if we do get to a point where we trust you and we believe your story about coming from 1,000 years in the past, we don't want to just let you keep your ship and go about whatever missions you want. Like we're gonna reassign you to other places. We're going to use you as we see fit, because we're the Federation and we're Starfleet and we need help. And if you can help us, we're gonna put you where we need you. And that is introduced as this threat to the crew, because it would be, just imagine how, because you're right, like all they have is each other, and imagine how crushing it would be to find the one place that you've been hoping to find. And then not only is it not what you expected, but there's the possibility that it's going to take away all of the other comforts that you still have. So, I mean, and granted, I don't think I never really believed that there's any danger of that happening. Like I did not think for a second that the show was going to go in that direction where they were all going to be reassigned to different ships.
Yeah, totally.
But just the fact that they introduced that possibility for the characters, I think that's the episode dealing with that. Where they're supposed to be a little over the top with their enthusiasm, and they're wide-eyed, like, oh, look, it's the Federation, because then the hard, cold hand of reality grabs a hold of them, and is like, it might not actually be that way,
Yeah, totally. I loved Giorgio figuring out how to disrupt the hologram interrogators, right? Like I loved that. Like I was a little bit confused about the whole Terran stuff, because like, are Terrans existing in the other timeline, or are there Terrans that exist in the world that that the Federation has never encountered in the main timeline? And like, are Terrans Earth?
Yeah. I think Terran is the term Terran is used pretty much exclusively now. It's been mixed in the past, but I think now when they say Terran, they mean a person from Earth from the Mirror Universe.
Yeah, it's all Mirror Universe.
Yeah.
Folks.
It's all okay.
Yeah.
Also, were you guys aware that the guy who came to interrogate Giorgio was David Cronenberg?
David Cronenberg, yes. How cool is that?
Shut up! I totally missed that.
How cool is that?
Interesting. Fascinating. Yeah, I like Giorgio's not being given much, but I'm enjoying what she is being given as like comic relief. And then also like the interrogation, I thought was a really nice reminder of like, yeah, she's here for Michael, right? Like she has this bond with Michael, and they haven't been able to show it, and they haven't really done anything with it, but they just, this subtle reminder of like, something's going to happen with that, right? Like something is going to evolve with their relationship. And I loved that. I'm really sad. Like I loved I really actually liked what they did narratively with this episode. I liked that they had to find a scientific solution to gain their trust, right? That they got to capitalize on what Michael and the team are really good at. And so seeing Michael convince them to save the lives of the bug people, I don't know who they are. That's the stand-in for whoever.
From the bug planet.
From the bug planet. Having Michael be like captain was really satisfying. Like having Michael be in her element as this leader, like this very compassionate leader that's like, yeah, you're being a dick to us and we're just going to ignore that and we're going to keep going, right? Because we need to save some people. And then having it be this like seed vessel, right? Like a seed bank, and the seed bank looked really cool. And then the vessel being covered in plants, and like, I don't know, I fucking loved all that. And I think that having it be the Barzon being another species that we are now just like learning about, I'm really sad that we lost what's her face? Like, I'm sad that she's, I can't even remember what her name is, but the
None.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sad that we lost her in this episode. Like, I didn't see that coming, and I don't really fully understand why that even happened. Like, I don't get what the whole thing was around it, but I appreciated the sort of conflict of culture that occurred, because that's so Star Trek-y, you know?
What was, it's because she was like, they don't see death. We don't see death the way that
I
you
don't
do.
fucking
But
know.
how, I was like, cool. How do you see it? And then they like, don't tell us.
What's that over there?
That
Yeah, I agree. They really, I wish they had explained some of that. But just like seeing someone who, you know, and they've done this a couple of times. Like they did it with Saru, and they're doing it with her now, where she's like, I haven't seen my people. Like, they disowned me because I joined Starfleet, which, yeah, they should have, because fuck military, but whatever. But like, you know, her hearing her language and all of that, like, I just found that really moving, and I liked that. And I would love to be on a ship full of living plants. That's amazing.
Well, and the whole thing where she comes back and like she can breathe and her eyes change back to their normal color, and like, you know, she kind of like comes alive in a particular way when she's in this environment that feels like home to her. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, and what I don't get is like, okay, so there's a couple things that like made no sense to me. Why is Culber telling Michael what to say to this strange man that has no relationship to any of them, when Culber could just tell him and do the, hey, your family's dead thing? I'm a doctor, I know. And he's very sensitive, so like he could do that diplomatically.
The whole, also like Michael's the main character, so she needs to go do it. Also the whole, well, you know, Non can't talk to him because they're from the same culture, so, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah,
just like
completely.
Absolutely none.
It was very contrived. And then also, like, why wouldn't you bring the seed ship back to the Federation? Because you can. It fits like a quarter of the size of your ship. Put it in your fucking docking bay and bring it back, because it's a Federation ship that they don't have access to anymore. Like, is Non taking it back to Barzan so that the family can be buried properly? And then what?
I wasn't
like,
clear
and then
on that
all of
either.
these seeds that have been saved by the Federation are just like at Barzan now that you don't have access
Also,
to.
they could beam up the bodies and the seeds, take the bodies with the spore drive to the Barzan planet, and then take the seeds back. Yeah, I was like, wait, that didn't make any sense.
Yeah, why is this working this way? Yeah, I wasn't clear on that either. You know, like, why can't they? Are they just going to leave that ship in the middle of that ion storm? Are they going to? Does it? Yeah, I wasn't clear on any of that, but I don't think any of that is supposed to be important to the episode. But still, it's like those details where you're like,
it was another thing where it's like, it's like Non. We want to write Non off, so I guess she's gonna stay on the ship for reasons.
Where she can sleep properly, whatever. I really loved the Hollow Doctor, because, you know, Voyager vibes. Like, I just was like, I like this little, you know, weird, creepy moment of humor. Also, the best line ever was in this episode where Jet says to Stamets, "Can we radiate your entire personality?" At the beginning of this, when Stamets is just a total, that's episode 4. When Stamets is just a total piece of shit to Tilly, I was like, oh, please don't come back to this. Like, I'm just barely not hating Stamets anymore. Like, you know,
Going back to what you were saying before, though, Anita, about seeing Michael as the captain, I feel like they did that, and they very deliberately had this person there who was watching them, right? You know, is whoever the security person that got sent along from future Federation. But I thought that was great, because we got to have this little encapsulated moment where it's like, seeing Michael step into her element, see the science team come together with their particular dynamic and solve this really complex problem, to be like, there are things about this that have gelled. Like, these characters are good at this, and they really do work well together. So it's, in a sense, they were proving it to, you know, the Federation observer or whatever, but also as an audience, I'm watching it and I'm like, yeah, they are good at this stuff. Nice job, show.
And they have the same problem that they had in episode 4, where it was like skeptical. Okay, instantly cool now. Like, oh, you work well together. Cool. And you're like, oh my God, come on.
Whatever. So this is a point of, you know, I guess plot question. Maybe I missed it and just am wrong, but did it come up at all that the Federation has no dilithium and they just have an absolute shit ton of dilithium on their ship?
They did not bring
They didn't
that up
mention that.
once
No.
in episode 5, which is very weird.
I also feel like if they can scan the symbiont and no Senatol is in there, they can probably scan the ship and know there is probably the biggest repository of dilithium in the galaxy on that ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very weird that it wasn't brought up even once, since that has been like the core
Yeah.
of every issue this whole season.
You're right. And that never occurred to me until you just brought that up. But
Yeah,
that has been like a central problem in every episode up to this point. And then they find the Federation and nobody mentions the fact that they have all this dilithium.
Well, when they were
we
doing
could
the
use that.
When they were like, yeah, we're going to requisition your ship and take all your people, I was like, well, the first thing they're going to do is take the dilithium. And frankly, they should, because probably the Federation as an organization needs it more. But then they're just like,
Yeah. I'm also starting to, not a lot, but I'm starting to worry a little teensy tiny bit about how they continue to tease out the mystery of what the burn was. And I know that that's sort of become part of the structure of the show, because the last season, it was sort of the ongoing story arc was built around this mystery that they needed to figure out as well. And that's fine. But I find that the current Star Trek shows, one of the problems I've had with all of them so far, even though I've mostly liked them all, but one of the issues I've had with the writing of them is that they backload the solutions to their mysteries so much. Like with the first season of Picard, that it had that problem where it's like, oh, there are all these questions and you want the answer to these questions and we're not going to tell you anything until the last episode. And then it's like,
and it's not going to be satisfying.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we already know it's not going to be satisfying.
And part of the reason it's not satisfying is because they make you wait so long and then they tell you everything all at once. And with Discovery, I'm really hoping that this season they don't backload it to that point where it's like, what's the burn? What happened? What caused the burn? What was the burn? And then they finally wait till the last episode and it's like, oh, it was this thing. And you're just like, oh, that's okay. I waited 13 episodes to find out that it was just something that happened, you know?
It was the Bug Planet people who were like,
exactly.
Whoops, we had an accident at our dilithium, like a power plant. They're like, dilithium plant had an accident and it just like killed all the dilithium in the planet. And whoops, sorry, y'all.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think they're gonna. I like that it's a mystery. I like that it wasn't neatly resolved. I would have liked to have heard, because they were like, "There's so many theories," and I was like, "Give me a couple." Like, make some shit up.
I was waiting for that.
She even asked, like, "What are some of your theories?" And he was like, "Nah."
I know. I mean, hopefully we'll get them later. I do like that Michael's gonna solve this problem, right? Like, Michael's obviously gonna figure it out. Which feels a little, boring and contrived, but also I really like her this season a lot. Like, I really, really like the depth they're giving her. And she's looser and she's more playful. And I think the actor's just being given a lot more to work with. And also her hair finally looks good. So there's that too. So it looks like Book is coming back. Thank God. I've been very lonely. And, it looks like they're going to have to escape or somehow leave the Federation to go save Book, right? Like, that was the sense that I got, or do something to help him. So yeah, we might know nothing more about dilithium and we might know nothing else, but at least we get Book back.
I like Book so much. I like him for Michael,
So
obviously, but I also like
and for
him,
me,
and for Anita.
Priorities.
But I also like Book. I think Giorgio touches on this at one point when Michael comes back. That there's maybe always been a part of her that hasn't totally vibed with the whole top-down hierarchical, Federation thing, and she spent this year with Book, not only forging this whole relationship with him, but forging this whole sense of herself outside of the Federation, and you can see it. I like that they've dealt with that with her coming back and her wanting to do outside of the box things, wanting to kind of go rogue on stuff, because that was how she survived. One, but two, I also think that she likes that version of herself. And I'm really curious to see the tension between those two versions of Michael, especially when Book is there to bring that out in her versus, her relationship to and responsibilities to Saru and the rest of the crew.
Yeah, it's been fairly superficial so far, and I'm really hoping that they lean a lot harder into that. I have a request. I would like someone to write me fan fiction of post season 3 Book and Michael becoming bandit lovers that just roam the galaxies with their cat babies and get into adventures and like, you know, do the back-to-back, like we're gonna like shoot our way out of here. I want this fantasy to come to life for me. So if anyone wants to write that for me, please do.
I think that could just be season 4 of this show. I mean,
Oh
like
God.
that.
Yes.
I would love, that's one of the things, as much as I've been a Star Trek fan my whole life, I adore Star Trek. I do always appreciate it when we get to see sort of sections of the world that are not Starfleet. You know, and that's one of the things that I really like about Book as a character. He's one of those even still like relatively few heroic characters who are not Starfleet or are not ex-Starfleet or are not affiliated with, like, he's a guy out there doing his own thing, trying to do the right thing, you know, on his own. He's not an officer. He's not in the service. He's just a guy trying to do the right thing. And it's nice, you know, for a franchise that is so centered on the institution of Starfleet and has invested so many hours in showing us, you know, how great and how noble these people in Starfleet are. It's nice to be reminded that, oh, there's a whole galaxy outside of this, you know, full of people who also have things to offer and can also be heroic as well. You know, so it's nice to have that, you know, that added sort of seasoning to it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, why don't we wrap up by giving our respective ratings for these episodes? You can do them together or separately, and you can give them ratings out of whatever you would like. So, Laura, how did you feel?
So we're doing this out of 10?
You're doing it out of whatever you want.
Okay. And this is me, I mean, rating it out of like really like, are we doing it? Okay. I'm like qualifications.
Make up your own rating system.
Okay. I'm doing this out of like all Star Trek ever, not
wow.
I'm not doing this in and of Discovery is what I'm saying. I'm talking about what I expect from like a really good Star Trek episode. I would give Forget Me Not a 6.5. There were things I liked about it. There were flaws, but I still found it appealing. And Die Trying, I'd give, I don't know, maybe a 5.75. That's what my heart says.
5.756298. Carry the one.
5.5 seems like it's like really boo. And like, you know, I'm not quite there. Not quite there.
All right, Steve. Please define your entire rating structure and then give us your rating.
What's the point of using a 10-point scale if you're just going to use decimal points anyway? I would give Forget Me Not, in honor of Buster Keaton, I will give Forget Me Not 4 out of 5 pork pie hats. And for Die Trying, in honor of the cause of the problems on the seed ship, I will give it 3 out of 5 coronal mass ejections.
Wow. Cool. All right. I'm going to rate mine based on this season of Discovery.
Okay.
Like very specifically based on the previous 3 episodes, which I loved. I am going to give episode 4 a 3 out of 5 seed banks. And I'm going to give episode 5 a 3.95. Maybe a 4 seed banks. So out of 5. Cool. Well, thank you, both of you, for joining us. Is there anything you want to plug or any places that folks can find you?
YouTube.
just YouTube and Steve will appear.
Yeah, exactly. YouTube.com/Steve Shives. If for some reason after listening to this, you think, I want to hear more from that guy.
You do. I know they do.
They do. They totally do. They just can't admit it to themselves yet.
In time. All in good time. I'm primarily on Twitter right now. That's Laura, LAURA _ Hudson, HUDSON. That's mostly where I am. I don't know. I've been thinking about starting a newsletter or something, so I might do that. We'll see.
I know lots of great people doing newsletters.
Right?
I love that idea.
Thank you,
I would
Anita.
read your newsletter.
Thank you. Maybe I will.
Great. I'll plug both of those links into the show notes for folks. So yeah, that's it for us. Join us in 2 weeks when we're going to be joined by Trace Dominguez and Charlie Jane Anders to talk about episodes 6 and 7. If you want to support this show, you can head over to patreon.com/femfreak and give us some money, and that will be lovely support. Thanks both of you for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening. Bye. I don't know why I waved. Bye.